Okay, so thank you all for joining us today. This is a recorded presentation on ARFID and how using a tool like hypnosis may be able to help some people in getting an ability to try and taste some new foods. So I know that this is a very exciting topic for a lot of people, and it might be a new topic for a lot of people. So I do want to thank Allison, who helped to set this up, and her very dynamic group is a reason that we're all here. So I do want to thank her for facilitating this and for being just so open to so many new ideas and getting so much information out there to all of us and helping us all to share and being so collaborative with everything. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to explain to you who I am, what I do, who I am, and then what we're going to do is go over kind of the basics of how hypnosis is utilized in ARFID, how it might be able to help you, what it looks like, some myths about it, because there's a lot of confusion surrounding it. And then what we're going to do is take some questions in the chat here, and we're going to go over some specific questions that you guys might be having. But I think that it's really, really important that you guys know who I am. There's a lot of feeding specialists out there, and it's really, really important that you feel comfortable and you know who I am if you're going to reach out to me and see if I might be a good fit for your family to help you, because there's a lot of different approaches out there. There's a lot of different ways to treat feeding, and some therapists are better fit for different families. And I think that it's really important for you to know who I am, where I come from, and really what my approach is like. So we're going to start there. I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes or maybe a few minutes longer, who I am, where I came from. And then I do have a little PowerPoint presentation. It's not very long, but it will be some slides just to help guide us in terms of keeping us on track, showing us what hypnosis looks like for ARFID. So like I said, my name is Kelly. I've been a feeding therapist for almost 2 decades now, which makes me seem very, very old. But I got my start. So my background is a speech pathologist. A lot of speech pathologists do work in obviously the speech and language world, but we do also treat feeding. You can also treat feeding via an occupational therapist. Sometimes in the psych world, psychologists or psychiatrists can treat feeding, and dietitians or nutritionists can also treat feeding. But there are a lot of speech pathologists that treat feeding. I think my understanding is it stemmed from, kind of the underlying belief that decades and decades ago, we are kind of the specialty that learned all the anatomy and physiology with the mouth and swallowing. So it was just a natural progression for us to help with feeding. But that being said, as you know, a lot of feeding concerns have really nothing to do with swallowing. Swallowing is fine, chewing is fine, and there's a huge behavioral component to it. And so, or there's a psych component or anxiety component. And so that's why a lot of psychologists that specialize in feeding, or the mental health world that specialize in feeding, can help as well. If you can pair the two together, that's awesome. It's great to have someone on your team that's from the mental health world, as well as somebody from the speech or OT world. That would be a best case scenario. It's wonderful when people are collaborating and working together. But my background is from a speech perspective, obviously. I was a new speech pathologist starting out. I was very medical based. I was doing, if your child has ever had a swallow study, I was doing swallow studies in a big, huge university hospital in Virginia. And I loved that. I did itty bitty babies. I worked in the NICU, things like that. And then from there, I moved to Florida. That's where I am now. I'm outside of Disney World. So I'm about 30 minutes away from there in a suburb. So I was working in a children's hospital here. And since I did have a lot of skills with swallowing and swallow studies and things like that, I became like the feeding therapist at my hospital. And there was an OT that did that also. So we kind of teamed up, and we were doing a lot of feeding. We were doing a lot of infant feeding. We were doing a lot of kind of toddlers, texture progression. A lot of parents had said, "Hey, my child's drinking from a bottle grate, or they're eating purees, but they just can't seem to chew, get to the next level, or they're spitting out bits of food. When yogurt has those little pieces, they won't tolerate that, or they gag all the time if I try to give them, soft carrots or something like that." So, and that was, kind of my cup of tea. I was like, great, I've done this over and over and over again. Toddler feeding was like our jam. We were running, you know, outpatient feeding clinics. We were doing intensive feedings, and we were really good with that. But what happened was, over the, as word got out that we were this, really competent feeding team, parents started bringing us bigger kids, and they were like 14, or they were 10, or they were 17. And, these kids didn't have chewing problems. They didn't have a diagnosis, maybe of autism. They maybe had sometimes every once in a while some sensory concerns, but really they didn't have anything like functionally or physiologically wrong with them. They just had anxiety around eating. They would say, "I have this huge fear of choking," or "I have a huge fear of putting that in my mouth because it seems slimy." And what started to happen was we got all these big kids on our caseload, and I was the feeding person. So they were like, "Give them to Kelly." And I was like, "Well, I don't know what to do with them." So it was really challenging. And this was a long, long time ago. And just a little bit about myself. I grew up with a lot of feeding concerns. I was a very, very selective eater, very selective. And I had a dad who was also very selective. My mom cooked and ate everything. But so he really understood, and he was never pushy. My mom was a very kind of free spirit, how do you want to say, non-strict type of mom when it came to eating, at least. And so, I'm 40, the generation that I grew up in, most of those parents, back then were kind of about finishing your plate and things like that. We know a bit better now. But, back then that was kind of the school of thought, but they didn't do that to me. They were very understanding of my feeding concerns even back then. And so I was kind of raised with, okay, no pressure eating. They did a kind of their version, even though I didn't know how. They did their version of like exposure therapy with me, and letting me get really comfortable with new food before trying it, and getting me kind of their version of what we would now call very like sensory, or very easy exposure therapy as I grew up. So I'm very understanding of how kids can like look at food, or teens can look at food and be like, "Oh my God, I cannot imagine eating that," because I had it myself. And I'm way better now. Way, way, way better. I eat a wide variety of foods. I am still pretty selective with some things. I need or prefer foods cooked in a certain way. And if it's not, it's very hard for me to eat it. But I have a very healthy relationship with food. I'm a healthy weight. I get plenty of calories when I need to. I eat vegetables, fruits. I eat soft foods. I really prefer things crispy. And when they're wet, it does really bother me. But I'm a social eater. I'm able to go to parties. I'm able to do sleepovers when I was younger. I lived in a dorm. I ate dorm food, and I carried 2 babies. And I had very healthy, successful pregnancies. And I'm able to date. I was able to date before I met my husband. I can go to any restaurant. I do modify my food, and I'm okay doing that. But I think it helps, when I get a teenager on my caseload who's 15. I'm able to say to them, "Hey, I was how you are, very, very restrictive at 15, and I'm on the other side now. And although I still do make concessions, I know how to do that for myself to have a successful relationship and a happy relationship with food. I love to eat now, and I can't say that I was always like that." So I think it does help when patients utilize my services for them to say, "Wow, I'm at rock bottom right now. I can't imagine getting out of this." They see me and they say, "Wow, this person did get out of it." And they have a fun, happy relationship with food. I can travel. I like going to different countries and exploring their food it's still more limited than what maybe some of my friends do, but I still do enjoy it. So I think it helps them to see that. And I'm happy about that. And I'm happy to share my experiences. I don't mind when people ask me questions. I don't think that that kind of peer-to-peer mentoring goes hand in hand sometimes with therapy. So I enjoy that and I like that. So back to when I was getting all these kids on my caseload, I was like, you're just like me, that's how I was. And I was kind of starting to learn that this isn't just something I was going through. This is something that a lot of people have. And of course, it wasn't diagnosed as ARFID back then. There wasn't even really like selective eating back then. It was more just like, wow, Kelly's like super picky. And my dad, he was even, more. I mean, he was raised way generations, decades ago. So, I said I need to learn. So I started taking course after course and class after class on anxiety and eating, and less from a speech perspective. Of course, I had all the feeding background of GI disorders and chewing disorders, feeding disorders, swallowing disorders. But I started taking a lot of courses on how that looks in terms of anxiety and phobias and food phobias and things like that. And we got really lucky. We had a doctor, not a medical doctor, but a doctor of psychology come to work at our hospital who happened to have a specialty in food. So she saw everything from a different perspective. She saw everything from like a fear of eating. So I went to all of her sessions. I worked with all of her kids. We worked as a team, and I got to see how she worked and saw how it was different from mine. And I soaked up everything. So that's how I got my start. And I started to kind of switch my sessions from a total speech perspective or a total like speech feeding therapist perspective, and kind of became a blend of speech and like anxiety, talk therapy, a little bit of exposure therapy, food chaining, and to take that psych perspective into my sessions. And then what happened is I left the hospital. There's a huge demand here, and as virtual kind of became more prevalent, obviously I can treat people virtually. So I started to take that into my private practice. And I kind of saw that although therapy was successful, it was also slow, which we know being therapy can be slow. But I started to see that there was this total phobia. And a great way to treat phobias can be hypnosis. So I found in the US here, there's this person who is this wonderful master hypnotist. He is not anything related with food, but he is great at hypnosis. So I had him personally train me one-on-one for a very long time. And he trained me in the art and the process of hypnosis, not relating to food. So I was able to learn how to do hypnosis and then apply it to the food phobia. So that's how I got kind of that blend. So I am someone who has a huge, strong background in feeding, and then also had a training in hypnosis. And I blended the two to kind of create my own protocol and how to help people. And that's really all I do. You can utilize hypnosis for a variety of things, obviously weight loss, smoking cessation, waking up early to work out, motivation, all that stuff. But I that's not my area. I'm sure I could, but I don't do that. I only do it for feeding. So that's kind of where I am now. It is hugely successful when you have the right person. So I want you to think of this as like a toolbox. If you find somebody that's like hypnosis for all feeding, that's not right. So, you have this kind of fear of feeding, or you have a feeding concern, you have a toolbox. Sometimes you can utilize talk therapy, you can use anxiety, like anxiety reducing techniques. You can use exposure therapy, you can use food chaining, you can use so many different things. One tool is hypnosis. Okay, so hypnosis will not work for all. So I just want you to remember that. And that's really, really important. It's just one tool in the toolbox. And if you find a very competent therapist, they will help guide you and say, wow, that looks like it would be a really great opportunity or a really great technique for your loved one or for you. Or they would say, wow, this really isn't appropriate for you, but there is another method or another technique that might work. And they should also go on to say, I'm the therapist that could help you and provide you with that. Or really, I'm not very skilled at this. I'm going to refer you to someone who can help you. That's the sign of a good therapist, in my opinion. So that's just a little bit of background. So I am going to share my screen with you right now so we can run through a little bit of a slideshow. It's brief, and then I'm going to answer some questions that popped up. So let me do this now. Okay. So this is okay. So this is me. This is kind of how I refer to myself, speech pathologist and feeding specialist. And like it says here, it's one treatment option. It's not the only one. Okay, so I just want you to remember that. Okay, we already went over who I am. This is the agenda. We're going to go over here, how it works, a little bit about myths, best candidates. So if you're watching this and you're thinking of yourself, or you're thinking of your child, you can kind of start thinking like, oh, cool, that might work for my loved one, or well, it's really isn't very appropriate. What are some other things that might work? How I do my technique, and then a little bit of, like I said, Q&A. Okay. Okay, so just the basics. So, okay, it really works best for like a fear-based eating disorder. So, like we're talking about fear-based, like a choking phobia. So I'm very, very scared that even though I know I can eat a blueberry and it's soft and I can chew it, it's fine. I'm scared it's going to get stuck in my throat, which I have a lot of these people. Texture phobia. Wow, I don't like how this feels. It's slimy and I'm really scared of it. Like I'm scared of that slimy in my throat. Like that. Fear of illness. I fear I might get sick. Fear of like sickness in terms of vomiting, or like a bad, like, wow, so sick I might die. I've heard like, well, I heard this news story and, food poisoning really can kill. Fear of contamination. This container might put a contaminant in my food that might kill me, might make me sick, or like fear of vomiting. I have a lot of people who have a fear of leftovers. So even though we know it's safe to eat it within 1 day or 2 days, they cannot bring themselves to eat leftovers. Or even a fear of like expiration date. I have people who cannot not stop checking expiration dates, or if something doesn't happen to have an expiration date on it, will not eat it. Like if it's not written or it's like blurry. So fear of that too. So that's a big one. Okay, so for a phobia, like for example, such a fear of heights, snakes, spiders, whatever. So I can tell you, like, okay, I live in Florida and I have a huge fear of snakes, right? This is just an example. So I have a huge fear of snakes, and you might not have a fear of snakes at all. You might be like, fine, it's just like might not like them, but you don't have a fear of it. I have a massive, huge, like if I see one, the anxiety, I can't breathe, like I get sweaty, I run so fast, I could run into a wall and get hurt. Like I just cannot stand them. And you could say to me, well, Kelly, it's like a black racer, it's not venomous, whatever. Even if it's not venomous, the fear is just as high. So I know it's irrational because it's not a venomous snake, right? So it can't hurt me, it can't kill me, it's probably not gonna bite me. And if it does bite me, nothing's gonna hurt. I'm fine, doesn't matter. So it's an irrational fear. So the difference is you would probably then say to me, oh, well, I get how you're afraid of snakes. Snakes are scary, you can't really tell if it's venomous or not. They're creepy, they're gross. Like nobody thinks they're cute and fuzzy, really. So you understand, you can empathize with me. With food, people that have ARFID, people that have a food phobia, if you can just like go in their mindset for a second, they have that same fear, that same anxiety, that same huge fear of, like, for example, pizza. And they know it's irrational, just like I know a non-venomous snake can't hurt me. They know pizza can't hurt them. They know it's irrational, right? They'll tell you. But the difference is it's hard for us to empathize. So even though you can empathize with my non-venomous snake story, right? You can say, I totally get you. I'm not scared of them, but I see how you are. People can't say, I'm not scared of pizza, but I totally get you. Pizza's scary. We don't say that. It's not reciprocal. And so that's why people feel so isolated, so alone. The fear is just as high, but nobody says back to them, I totally get it. I totally get why you're so scared. Same thing with like a fear of flying. I don't have a fear of flying, right? But if somebody says, oh my God, Kelly, I have a huge fear, extreme fear of flying. I totally can say, I don't have a fear of flying, but I get how you do. Like that plane can just phew, fall out of the sky. It's scary when it's bumpy and turbulent. I'm fine with it, but I totally get why you aren't. But if somebody says, I have a fear of like raisinets because the gooey, like, or the bumpy raisin inside, like freaks me out, I'm not going to say like, or I would because I work with people, but nobody's going to say, I totally get you. Right. So that's really hard. And I think if we can change our mindset and start thinking about it this way, that might help a lot of our patients. So it is a true phobia, just like that. So everybody has a phobia. Everybody has a fear. I haven't met anybody who's not afraid of anything. So it's different from a dislike. It's just, it is, it's different. It's that same anxiety producing fear. So when we use hypnosis, it can help us restructure how we think about the world. So in a fear scenario, what happens is, you kind of think, and this is a very simple way of thinking of it, but you have kind of two parts of your brain. One part is kind of like, okay, you're good with this. The other is saying, this is a fear for you. If we just kind of talk to that part of the brain that's saying, this is a fear for you, it's really hard for us to have a conversation with that part of the brain, right? That part of the brain is like really strong. If we're in a relaxed state like hypnosis, and hypnosis is really just like a relaxed state. It's almost like a twilight sleep, or like if you're in deep meditation. When you're in that deep meditative state, almost like that front part of your brain that's kind of blocking will go to rest, go to sleep, and we're able to talk to that part of your brain that has the fear stored in it. And when we're able to talk to that part of the brain that has the fear stored in it, we can have a conversation with that part and kind of say, hey, let's rework and rethink how we're thinking about that fear, and let's get rid of that fear. So then when you're back in an awake state, that part that was asleep is awake again, but we've already had a conversation with that part that has the fear, and that fear is gone. Okay, so that's kind of how it works in a very simple way. Okay, so some of the myths surrounding hypnosis, there's a lot of myths. And these are important to go over because I do hear them a lot. One myth is that it's dangerous. It is not dangerous. You're not going to slip into a coma. You're not going to like never wake up. That's not going to happen. It can't make you do anything you don't want to do. So one of the big things with hypnosis is you have to want to do the thing that you're being hypnotized to do. So for example, take the person with smoking cessation. If somebody really wants to quit smoking, then that hypnosis is going to work. If somebody really doesn't want to, you can hypnotize anybody all the time. They're not going to quit smoking. It's not going to stick. So if somebody, like, I have some parents say, well, my son, it doesn't want to stop eating, doesn't want to change his eating. If he doesn't want to change his eating, you can't hypnotize him to change his eating. But if he really, really wants to, he's like, Mom, I'm so sick of this. I want to go to summer camp. I want to, be able to go and eat pizza with my friends. If he really wants that, then that's where we can utilize this. That's great. It's not a magic bullet. It can help. Like if you've been in feeding therapy for like 2 years, like exposure therapy or something, and you're progressing so slow, it can help kind of like move everything along so much more quickly. It can get you over that hurdle of tasting and trying, but you still have to put in the work. So after you taste and try, you're still going to have to put in the work to give yourself that food to make it like normal for you. But it's not like a one and done, like, oh, cool, you're done. And then you never have to do anything again. Like if we do hypnosis and then you taste like strawberry, pineapple, pizza, pasta, and carrots, right? And you're able to taste them all. Cool, you're fine. You ate, you swallowed. Great. It's not like that's just a part of your diet now. You tasted it, which is great, but it's up to you. And I have systems in place to help you continue eating it, but it's still going to be work to continue the trials. And that's where the maintenance comes in. And that's the hard part. It's not for everyone. Like we said, there's criteria we look at, a little bit of age criteria, a little bit of motivation criteria, and it's not complete in one session. You do the hypnosis in one session, but there is definitely maintenance afterwards, and I can't stress that enough. Okay, so who's the best candidate for hypnosis? Usually adults or like young teenagers. I feel like young teenagers are such a good place to do it because they are like, they've had this. Usually parents are like around 2-ish, they stopped eating these foods or whatever, or they had some main event or big event when they were young. And a lot of times 5, 6, 7-year-olds like could care less. Like honestly, they're just eating, they're going to school, they're happy, they love their mac and cheese and fries, and then that's it, right? But by the time somebody is like 14, maybe 16, they maybe want to grow because they're playing sports, they're going through puberty, they want to date, they want to be like, there's that peer pressure to fit in with friends, they want to go to sleepovers, they want to go to camp, they want to go to college, they have to eat in a dorm. Like there's all these life changes that make them want to be more social with eating. So young teen is it's a big, big, big age. So people who want to change are the best candidates. If it's just that mom and dad really want you to change and you don't want to change, it's not going to be beneficial. And then, like I said, people who understand there's still work to be done after the hypnosis sessions are complete. So like I said, the hypnosis will get you over that hump of tasting, okay? And it will get rid of that, like, the little rabbit bites like that you do, and all those like, oh my gosh, I don't want to, I want to, and then like that whole stuff, that part will go away. It will allow you to taste without fear, and then kind of like figure out, do I like that or not? And if you like it, great. The next day, it still might be challenging to try it, but you have to give it to yourself every day to make it like a part of your regular diet. If one of your favorite foods is fries and you tasted carrot and you were able to taste it without fear, great. Are you going to like that carrot as much as fries? No way. You've been having fries forever. You love it. It's super safe. You're comfortable. Carrots you were okay with, but it's new. In order to make it regular for you, you have to do it all the time. And it is that maintenance that's hard. Okay, so my technique. So this is a technique that I use, that I have like changed, honed over the years, that I've found to be the most successful. So this is what I use. Other providers, other therapists, I don't know anybody else here in the US that does hypnosis for ARFID, and other providers that do hypnosis might not utilize this structure. This is just what I use. I always do 5 sessions total. We meet and get to the root cause of the feeding concerns. That's really important to me. I like to get to know you. Most of the time when you think about it, these kids, people are always talking about like negative, feeding has always been a challenge, always been a struggle. And then you go meet with people like me, and mom and dad are just talking about like eating's hard. They don't want to eat. They don't like to, they don't like Thanksgiving. They don't like Christmas. Everything's negative, negative, negative. Feeding is hard. And there's been tons of fights, all this stuff, right? So I also like to kind of get to know you or your child, and like from a positive perspective, like, just because eating is hard doesn't mean that you're a bad person. I wasn't a bad person growing up. I had a lot of great qualities. So does your child. So we talk about, what are you good at? Cool. Do you like art? Are you an artist? Can we do show and tell? Do you like to read? Do you like to write? Are you great at math? Like, are you a gamer? Do you play lots of fun games? Like, there's so many things that you could share that we can build up your confidence, because when you aren't a great eater, it's like an everyday, all day, 24-hour negative, like horrible thing. So I try to spend a lot of the session talking about the good things in your life and not just all this negativity, because it's hard. And that's hard to take as a kid. It's hard to know mom and dad are fighting about your eating. It's hard to know that mom is concerned about you eating all the time. It's hard to know you have to go to school and worry about your eating. It's a lot. So we get to the root cause of the feeding concern, but we also try to grow a lot of your positivity. That's really important to me. And then after that first session, we typically do a practice hypnosis session. I send you a recording that you listen to on your own, just so you can get out of your head, like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be really scary. Am I gonna be okay? Am I gonna go into some weird voodoo world? And that has nothing to do with feeding. Then you come back and say, cool, I did that. It was great. The second session, we do a hypnosis session together in like live. And you'll have some food set up that we'll try together after that. And we will have gone over what those foods will be. And then sessions 3 through 5 are all follow-ups with practice in between that we'll set up for you. And maybe continued hypnosis is needed, but we usually don't need to do that. And then some people will do like And those sessions are usually a week apart, so it's usually 5 weeks. Sometimes we'll do monitor sessions as needed. So like, okay, I'll see you in like 2 months. We'll just do like a one-off booster session, or hey, I'm going off to college. Can I meet you real quick just to like refresh? Or hey, we're going to summer camp. Can we try some of these foods together? I know what's going to be on the menu, or something like that, or like a big life change if something's happening, we're moving, and things like are anxiety producing, because we know that when life changes, anxiety goes up, and a lot of times food is like the first thing that's hit. So I do kind of become a part of your family. And we do kind of circle back every once in a while, but I have a lot of patients that are just done and we're good. And I do tend to put you on my schedule like every, once a year, just a touch base. Hey, how are things going? Just because I like to know, I like to stay in touch. So that's how it works, pretty much. So I'm going to go over a couple of questions right now. So it's some people are kind of asking here, is insurance accepted? So I'm a private pay practitioner. I do not take insurance, but there are a couple options. So I am an out-of-network provider, so I can provide you with a super bill, all the codes. I'm a licensed therapist, so you can submit to your insurance for out-of-network benefits. And some people get reimbursed that way. I will say it can be hard if you're out of the state of Florida for even out-of-network benefits, but some people have been successful just like even for a portion of reimbursement. So you can do that. A lot of people pay with like an HSA or FSA card if you have money set away that way. So I'm able to take that, or just regular payments too. Is it okay to do virtual sessions? Yep, it works just as well virtually as it does in person. Obviously, I'm not like a massage therapist. I don't need to touch you, and everything is auditory. So it's fine to do it virtually. I do have some people who do prefer in person. They're just more comfortable not over the screen. And so I'm happy to do that. If we do that, and you come down to see me, just it's still 5 sessions. The schedule is just a bit different, just more pushed all together, obviously, because you don't want to be here for 5 weeks. So that's how that works. I know there's a lot of questions about age, so it does work better if you're a little bit older, under it's really gray around like the 8, 9, 10 age. But I can always have a conversation with you and see what your child is like, see if there's some wiggle room there with how we can work with you and your child. And remember, there are some other techniques we can use. It's not like like a slam the door shut. If your child is of a certain age, there are some other things we can do, and we can modify a little bit of the hypnosis, sometimes not make it as long, because little kids can be kind of restless and that can be hard to listen for so long. So we can try that as well. Another question too, does this work? So I do work with a lot of people with autism, neurodiverse clients, depending, a lot of people can have very high verbal skills. So that's fine. If your child or you know somebody that you're thinking of is nonverbal, then we can't do hypnosis with somebody who's nonverbal. But I do have a lot of patients with pretty impaired verbal skills, or even that use like all calm systems, like a device. So we can work with feeding with that, but it's not this technique. But I do have a lot of people that I do work with who do have autism or who do have very limited verbal skills. And I have spent a lot of my career working with people with autism. So I do a lot of feeding with autism also. So I can chat with you about that if you do have a question. Let's see. Is it better to have an OT see my child or a speech? So that's kind of, like I said earlier, OT and speech are kind of like, back in the day, like speech used to do like oral motor, chewing, swallowing, and OT used to be like a sensory type person, like sensory progression, texture stuff. these days, it should be more of a crossover, shouldn't be so like black and white. What I tell parents is I'm not too concerned what the letters are after the person's name. It needs to be somebody who specializes in ARFID. So like I said, way at the beginning, you know, if you have somebody who just does like baby, toddler texture progression, they would not be skilled at help, even though they're a feeding therapist, they probably wouldn't have the training to help somebody who's 13 and is afraid of food. Two totally separate issues, right? So that's where you would get into trouble. Not so much OT or ST, it's can't chew versus afraid of food. So it's a big difference. The other thing I do want to mention is make sure you don't leave out your GI doctor. It's very, very important. You might think there's nothing going on, and that's fine, but I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have had picky eating, selective eating, food refusal, whatever you want to call it at this point, because I know a lot of you don't have a diagnosis, and they have overlooked the GI and they have had a GI full workup, talking gastric emptying study or a scope or anything, and it's come back with something like maybe EOE, Crohn's, celiac, something like that, even though the child has never complained of anything. So I just want you to be really aware of that. You don't want to be treating something with therapy that is a medical issue, because you'll just be banging your head against the wall forever. And you need to treat, you'll probably still need therapy, but you need to treat the medical issue, obviously. So I just want you to be really aware of that. Make sure you have your child looked at by GI. Okay, so if you want to get in contact with me, I'm always open for a conversation. If you just have questions, anything, or if you want to set up an evaluation and assessment, the easiest way to do it, you can email me. I'm at kelly@pickyeatersonline.com, or you can visit my website at pickeyeatersonline.com. There's also in Allison's group in the chat, there's also a link to my Calendly, which is my scheduling system, and you can always book a free consult there. So that's the easiest way to like know my open times, and you just book a free consult. It's like 20 minutes and it will show my times, and just put your name and information in and I'll call you at that time. That's the easiest way to talk with me. Also on my website, there is also a link to Calendly, and really that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'll show you here just in case you need it. This is the contact information. Kelly at Picky Eaters Online, pickeyeatersonline.com. So if you just go to the website, you can find it'll say like contact me here. It will be my Calendly link. Okay, so I want you to, I just want to thank all of you. I really, really appreciate your time. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Bye-bye.